Who is King Charles III? Well, you may know him as the King of England, but his full title suggests much more than that. As declared in his accession proclamation, His Majesty is styled as follows: Charles III, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. That's a lot to take in. Let's break it down piece by piece. This first part that I've included, His Majesty, is not technically part of his full style, but is rather an honorific or form of address. As you'll certainly have heard, it can be said instead of or preceding the name of a monarch, noble, or other official. In the United Kingdom, there are many different forms of address, corresponding with different ranks of nobility and elected officials. Princes and princesses are styled Royal Highness, dukes and duchesses use Grace, and most of the remaining peerage simply use Lord or Lady, with the exception of knights, who are referred to as Sir or Dame. Charles III is, obviously, the name of the king in question. He was born as Prince Charles Philip Arthur George, which was shortened to just Charles when he ascended to the throne, as is tradition for monarchs. He is the third because there have been two other kings named Charles in the UK and England since the Norman Conquest in 1066, which is as far back as British regnal numbers count, and is generally considered the beginning of the modern monarchy. The other two Charleses were actually quite controversial in their time. Charles I was the last monarch before the interregnum, a period of time in English history when a civil war led to the brief abolition of the monarchy. Charles I's perceived despotism was a root cause of this civil war, and he was beheaded for it in 1649. His son, Charles II, was restored to the throne just 11 years later in 1660, but he had problems of his own. For one, he shared his father's tendency towards absolutism, and he was also something of a womanizer, having 7 different mistresses throughout his life. Needless to say, the royal name of Charles has some baggage behind it. Due to this, there was some speculation before Prince Charles took the throne that he might use a different royal name. The press thought that George might be a top pick, with the monarchs associated with that name being much less controversial. This would have made Charles into George VII, but despite these journalists' predictions, Charles III ascended to the throne with his own name on the 8th of September 2022. In the context of the king's style, the phrase, "by the grace of God," denotes that the monarch, on paper at least, derives his power directly from the Christian God. This concept is called the divine right of kings, and boldly states that Charles, and all the kings and queens before him, are not beholden to any earthly authority, answering only to the almighty God above. Of course, in the modern day this is nowhere near true, with the king very much answering to even such earthly authority as the House of Commons. The last monarch to disobey Parliament was Queen Anne in 1708, and that was only because Parliament itself asked her to veto one of its own laws, since it was easier than getting it repealed themselves. That being said, when it was first introduced, this phrase was more than just ceremonial. It was a justification for absolutism by claiming divine right. The phrase "by the grace of God," or "de gratia" in Latin, has been used on and off by British and English monarchs since the second Norman King of England, William II, adopted the simple style "by the grace of God, King of the English." His predecessor, William the Conqueror, was even more brief with his title, simply being King of the English. Needless to say, monarch styles have gotten much more convoluted since then. While William II was the first to take this title, the divine right of kings implied by this phrase is most closely associated with Henry VIII, who was the first English king to break with the Catholic Church. I'll touch on his story in more detail later in this video. This one is obvious enough. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is the name of the country that Charles is king of. However, the UK is not the only country of which he is king, and he is accordingly styled differently in the other Commonwealth realms, most often following the format Charles III, by the grace of God, king of the country in question, and his other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth. So then, why is it called the United Kingdom? The use of the name United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland specifically dates back to 1953, when the Republic of Ireland gained independence. Before that, it was just the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, which became the official name of the country in 1800 with the Acts of Union between Britain and Ireland, and then was reflected in the monarch's title the following year in 1801. Before then, Britain and Ireland were simply held in personal union by the monarch, as the independent Kingdom of Ireland and Kingdom of Great Britain. Funnily enough, before the Acts of Union 1800, the British monarch's style still included the title King of France. This claim to the French throne dates all the way back to 1340 with Edward III and the Hundred Years' War, which began due to that very claim. By 1800, Britain had not controlled any French territory for many centuries, and after the French Revolution in 1792, there wasn't even a king of France with a throne to contest, so George III thought it expedient to use the opportunity of the title already being revised to drop this medieval claim. Alright, so what are the other realms and territories mentioned in the king's title? Realms, historically called dominions, are independent countries of which the official head of state is still the British monarch. They are vestiges of the old empire, though in the modern day the UK holds no real political sway over them except in very occasional ceremonial roles. Most of the realms gained independence gradually, and have kept on good terms with Britain. The most prominent of them are Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, but if you want to see the full list, they're being shown on screen now. The British Overseas Territories, or more simply just territories, are neither independent nor officially part of the United Kingdom. They are almost all small islands, governed directly by the UK, with limited amounts of self-governance, functioning essentially like modern-day colonies. Even all combined, they have a very small population, only about 250,000 people, or 0.3% of the British population. Almost all residents of the BOTs are British citizens. There are far too many for me to bother saying them all out loud, but the full list is on screen now. I would like to note some of them specifically, though. The British Antarctic Territory has no permanent population and actually overlaps with the Chilean and Argentinian Antarctic claims. If we count its full claim territory, though, it makes up the vast majority of the landmass of the BOTs. Another of note is the Indian Ocean Territory, better known as the Chagos Islands. These islands have been claimed by Mauritius for many years, and in October 2024, an agreement was reached to have them returned. As of yet, a date has not been set for the actual transfer to occur. I do also want to briefly mention the Crown dependencies, which are not mentioned in the King's title, but are their own category of land separate from the British Overseas Territories over which Charles III is the head of state. Like BOTs, they are governed from the UK and are not sovereign nations, but they have a higher degree of self-governance. They're all located in Europe, not too far from the UK itself, and consist of the Bailiwick of Guernsey, the Bailiwick of Jersey, and the Isle of Man. Obviously, King is the official title of the British monarch. The question then is, why is it included so late into his full style? As far as I can tell, very few other monarchs are styled this way, with their royal title being listed after all of their territories. Prior to George III's restyling in 1801, this was not the case, and the word king appeared directly after by the grace of God, like how the monarch is styled in the non-UK realms in the modern day. Despite my searching, I was unable to find an answer as to why this was the case, so my current best guess is that it was simply a stylistic choice. It does make the title sound a little more proper and British, for what it's worth. If anyone knows if there's a historical reason for the British style to be formatted this way, do let me know in the comments. Either way, I digress. The title itself, King, is generally speaking the second highest royal title one can take, below Emperor but above Prince, Duke, and Baron. So why is the British monarch, whose nation once controlled a quarter of the Earth's landmass, only a king and not an emperor? Well, once upon a time, the British sovereign did indeed hold that title, though initially it was as Empress, not Emperor. In 1876, following the British annexation of India from the British East Indies Company, Queen Victoria styled herself Empress of India, though she remained only the Queen of Britain. Victoria took the title in order to increase her prestige in accordance with the size of her empire, and so that her daughter, who was marrying the man that would go on to become the Emperor of Germany, would not outrank her. The title Emperor of India was dropped by George VI in 1948 after India became independent. Head of the Commonwealth is one of the newer titles found in the King's style. Beginning in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the British Empire was slowly starting to undergo some reforms. Especially as Britain's colonial territory began to decline following World War II, the words Commonwealth of Nations were increasingly beginning to be favored over the old term Empire. This was not just a change of phrasing, though. In truth, Britain was beginning to slowly let go of control of many of its former colonies. This new Commonwealth of Nations would eventually become not a direct instrument of British imperialism, but a free association between independent countries who all just so happened to share allegiance to the British Crown. Even that allegiance, though, would not last forever among Commonwealth members. When India and Pakistan gained independence in 1947, they chose to become republics, but remained members of the Commonwealth. Even though today not all nations of the Commonwealth swear allegiance to King Charles, it remains a British-led association, with its leadership tied intrinsically to the Crown. The Commonwealth members include all of the aforementioned realms, as well as many other countries with historical ties to Britain. The full list is on screen now. As the Commonwealth of Nations was something that formed gradually, not evolving into the international organization that we know today until quite recently, the title Head of the Commonwealth is a rather new one to the monarchy, only being officially adopted by the late Elizabeth II in 1953, meaning that King Charles is only the second monarch to hold this title. Much like the king's other responsibilities, his role as head of the Commonwealth is almost entirely symbolic. All he really has to do is occasionally keep in touch with Commonwealth organizational leadership and attend, or send a representative to, the biennial Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. As the final title in the monarch's style, Defender of the Faith is another that tells of the king's role in British Christianity, both modern and historical. In addition to claiming earthly power by virtue of God, as mentioned previously, the British monarch is also the head of the Church of England, and thus is expected to uphold and defend the faith, whatever that means. The first monarch to hold this title was Henry VIII in 1521. Remember him? He was awarded the title by the Pope himself only 13 years before splitting from the Catholic Church, primarily for the reason that the Church refused to grant him a divorce with his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Ironically, Leo X created him Defender of the Faith for publishing a book called Defense of the Seven Sacraments, in which he defended, of all things, the sanctity of marriage and the supremacy of the Pope. King Henry kept the title even after becoming Protestant in 1521, though in 1535 he added the confusingly worded "of the Church of England and of Ireland on Earth's Supreme Head" to his style in order to reflect his new role as interpreter of God's will. The title Defender of the Faith has been held by every British monarch since then, making it arguably the oldest in continuous use, if you count King of England, King of Great Britain, and King of the United Kingdom as different titles. Other monarchs have also been granted this title for various reasons, including Scottish, Polish, and Ethiopian sovereigns, though none of them other than King Charles holds it today. So there you have it, all you've ever wanted to know about the King of Britain's full style and title. I sincerely hope you enjoyed taking a look at British history through this lens, and let me know in the comments if there are any other monarchs or countries you'd like me to do this with. If you did enjoy, please do leave a like, and consider subscribing to my channel, as this is only the second video I'm publishing to this channel. Until next time, class is adjourned.